The massive space station, called Voss Prime, floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most moons, with towers that stretched out like metal fingers reaching into space. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its ports every day. Today, the station was more crowded than usual. The Galactic Council was hosting the Critical Species Integration Summit, and delegates from across known space had come to attend. Ambassador Taman stood near a large window watching the ships come and go. He was a human, which meant he was still new to all of this. Humanity had only met aliens 15 years ago, and many species in the galaxy still didn't trust them. Humans were too emotional, too unpredictable, too strange. That's what the other species said anyway. Taman didn't look worried. He was a calm man in his mid-30s, wearing the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. His black hair was neatly combed, and his dark eyes watched everything with quiet attention. He had learned long ago that patience was more powerful than panic. "Appa, look at that ship!" His daughter Nari pressed her small hands against the window. She was 6 years old, with bright eyes full of wonder. "It looks like a giant fish." "That's a Quelix transport," Taman said with a small smile. "They're a water species. Their ships are designed to feel like swimming through an ocean." "Cool," his son Hyunwoo said. The boy stood next to his twin sister, equally fascinated. "Do you think they'd let us see inside?" "Maybe later," Taman replied. "Right now, I need to attend a meeting. Your mother will be here soon to pick you both up." "Oh," both children groaned together. Taman knelt down to their level. "I know meetings are boring, but this is important work. We're here to show the galaxy that humans can be trusted. That means following the rules and being respectful." "We know, Appa," Nari said seriously. "We'll be good." "I know you will." Taman kissed both their foreheads. "Stay in this section. Don't wander off. Your mother will be here in 20 minutes. The children nodded, and Taman left for his meeting. He trusted them. They were good kids, curious, but careful. What could possibly go wrong in 20 minutes? Nari and Hyunwoo watched ships for a while, but soon grew bored. The diplomatic quarter of the station was beautiful but empty. Most of the delegates were in meetings. The long hallways were quiet, except for the hum of the station's systems. "Want to explore?" Hyunwoo asked. "Appa said to stay here," Nari reminded him. "We'll stay in this section. Just walk around a little. Look at the decorations." That seemed reasonable to Nari. They had been sitting for over an hour already. A short walk wouldn't hurt. The twins wandered down a corridor lined with displays from different species. There were holographic art installations, crystalline sculptures, and weapons mounted on walls. Each display had a plaque explaining what it was and which species had contributed it. They turned a corner and found themselves in a section they hadn't seen before. This hallway was darker, lit with blue lights that made everything look mysterious. At the end of the hall stood 2 tall figures. The figures were aliens, but not like any the children had seen before. They stood over 7 feet tall, with bodies covered in dark chitinous plates that looked like armor. Their heads were angular and insect-like, with compound eyes that gleamed in the blue light. They didn't move at all. They stood perfectly still, like statues. "Whoa," Hyunwoo whispered. "What are those?" "I think they're guards," Nari whispered back. "Look at what they're wearing." On each guard's head sat an enormous helmet, but these weren't ordinary helmets. They were made of some kind of crystal that caught the light and split it into rainbows. The helmets were beautiful, with flowing designs carved into them. They looked ancient and important. "Those are so cool," Hyunwoo breathed. The children crept closer. The guards still didn't move. Up close, the twins could see that the guards weren't even breathing. They really were like statues. "Maybe they're robots," Nari suggested. "Or maybe they're just really good at standing still," Hyunwoo said. They walked right up to the guards, still no movement. The helmets were even more beautiful up close. The crystals seemed to glow from within, pulsing with soft light. I want to try one on, Hyunwoo said. We shouldn't, Nari said, but her voice wasn't very certain. She wanted to try one on too. They're not using them, Hyunwoo reasoned. Look, they're not even real guards. They're just statues or robots standing here for decoration. We'll just try them on for a second and put them right back. It made sense to the 6-year-old mind. The guards weren't real. The helmets were just sitting there. No one was around. They'd be quick. Hyunwoo reached up, but even stretching on his toes, he couldn't reach the helmet. Help me, he whispered to Nari. Together, the twins managed to lift one of the heavy crystal helmets off its stand. It was heavier than they expected, and it took both of them to carry it. The guard didn't react at all. See? Just decoration, Hyunwoo said triumphantly. Encouraged, they took the second helmet too. The guards remained perfectly still. The helmets were far too big for the children. When Hyunwoo put his on, it slipped down over his entire head and rested on his shoulders. He had to tilt his head back to see out through the eye holes. I'm a space warrior, he declared, his voice echoing inside the crystal. Nari giggled and put on the other helmet. I'm a space explorer. Let's go find aliens. They stumbled down the hallway, the massive helmets making them clumsy. But they were having fun, pretending to be heroes on an adventure. In their minds, they were brave warriors protecting the galaxy from monsters, not two children who had just taken something very, very important. Behind them, still standing in perfect stillness, the guards' compound eyes began to glow red. Deep inside the station's security center, alarms started to sound. Commander Veskith of the Krethix Empire was in a diplomatic meeting when his communicator buzzed with an emergency signal. He looked down at it, saw the code, and his entire body went rigid. Excuse me, he said in a voice like grinding stone. He stood abruptly and left the room, his chitinous armor clicking with each step. Other Krethix warriors met him in the hallway, all showing signs of extreme agitation. In their species, very little caused alarm, but this did. The honor guard Helms have been taken, one of them reported. Both of them, the sacred relics of the blade bearers. Veskith's mandibles clicked together in anger. Seal the station. Find who did this. They will face Krethix justice. Throughout Vos Prime, blast doors began to close. Ships attempting to leave were ordered to return to dock. Security forces from a dozen species mobilized. An emergency broadcast went out to all delegates. Station lockdown in effect. Security incident in diplomatic quarter. All personnel remain in current locations. In his meeting, Taemin heard the announcement. His first thought was of his children. He was on his feet and moving before anyone else in the room even reacted. He ran through the corridors, his heart pounding. When he reached the diplomatic quarter, security forces had cordoned off several sections. He pushed past them, showing his credentials. My children, he said urgently. Have you seen 2 human children? A security officer checked his tablet. 2 juveniles were located in Observation Deck 7. They are currently detained there pending... Taemin didn't wait to hear more. He ran toward the observation deck, fear and confusion mixing in his chest. What had happened? Were they hurt? Were they in danger? He burst through the doors of the observation deck and stopped. There, sitting on the floor surrounded by at least 20 armed security personnel from various species, were Nari and Hyunwoo. They were wearing enormous crystal helmets and appeared to be in the middle of an elaborate pretend battle with invisible space monsters. Pew, pew, Hyunwoo was saying, pointing his finger like a gun. Take that, space squid! Relief flooded through Taemin, followed immediately by understanding. Oh no, they didn't. Commander Veskith appeared at his shoulder, radiating fury. Your spawn have stolen the sacred honor guard helms of the Krethix Empire. This is an act of war. They will be tried under galactic law and... Taman held up one hand, silencing the commander. He walked calmly into the room and sat down on the floor a few feet away from his children. They looked up, saw him, and waved. "Hi, Appa. We're fighting space monsters." Taman smiled at them. Then he looked up at the assembled crowd of angry aliens, security forces, and officials. His voice was calm and certain when he spoke. "They'll return them when they're done playing." The observation deck fell into shocked silence. Every alien in the room stared at Taman as if he had just spoken in an unknown language. Commander Veskith's mandibles opened and closed several times before he found words. "Done playing," the Krethix commander repeated slowly. "Your juveniles have committed a crime punishable by death in our culture, and you speak of playing?" Taman didn't stand up. He remained seated on the floor, watching his children with a small smile. Nari was now making whooshing sounds and pretending the helm was a spaceship. Hyunwoo was crawling around on his hands and knees, apparently pretending to be some kind of alien creature. "They're 6 years old," Taman said simply. "They don't understand the significance of what they took. They saw something shiny and interesting. To them, those helms are costumes for pretend games, not sacred relics." "That is precisely the problem." A new voice joined the conversation. Counselor Draith of the Vorn Collective pushed through the crowd. He was a small, quick-moving being with gray skin and large black eyes. "Your species cannot control its juveniles. This proves humans are unfit for galactic society." Other aliens murmured in agreement. High Arbiter Yaleen, a tall and ancient-looking being with pale blue skin and silver robes, stepped forward. Her species, the Quarians, lived for centuries and prided themselves on wisdom. "Ambassador Taman," she said in a cold voice, "I must insist you retrieve the items immediately and discipline your offspring. This behavior cannot be tolerated." Taman finally looked up at her. His dark eyes were calm but firm. "I will not interrupt them." The observation deck erupted in chaos. Aliens began shouting in dozens of languages. The station's translation systems worked overtime to keep up. "Unacceptable!" Draith shrieked. "The items must be returned now." "Those helms have been worn only by warriors who earned the title of Blade Bearer," Veskith roared. "Each helm is over 3,000 cycles old. They cannot be treated as toys." "Your spawn must be removed and the items secured," another delegate called out. Through it all, Taman remained seated. He did glance at his children occasionally, but mostly he looked at the assembled aliens with an expression of complete calm. Yunji, another human diplomat, pushed her way to his side. She was a woman in her 40s, experienced and practical. She knelt beside Taman and whispered urgently in Korean. "Taman, what are you doing? This is a disaster. We're supposed to be proving humans can follow galactic protocols. Instead, you're making us look like we can't even control our children." "I am controlling them," Taman said quietly. "I'm letting them play." "That's not control, isn't it?" Taman gestured to his children. "Look at them. They're not hurting anyone. They're not damaging the helms. They're just playing. When they're finished, they'll give them back." "When they're finished?" Yunji looked horrified. "Taman, we don't have time for this. The entire station is in lockdown. Ships can't leave. Delegates are furious. This could destroy Earth's chances at full membership in the Galactic Council." "Maybe," Taman agreed. "But I won't traumatize my children by ripping those helms off their heads and yelling at them for something they didn't know was wrong. They're learning right now. They're exploring. They're using their imagination. That's more important than politics." Yunji stared at him for a long moment, then stood and walked away, shaking her head. High Arbiter Yaleen approached next. She looked down at Taman with an expression of stern disapproval. "I am beginning to understand why so many species have concerns about humanity." You appear to have no discipline, no respect for authority, and no understanding of consequences." "I understand consequences very well," Taman replied. "I also understand child development. Do you?" "Our young emerge from gestation fully mature," Yelene said coldly. "They require no development. They are capable of rational thought and responsible behavior from the moment of birth." "How convenient for you," Taman said. He didn't sound sarcastic, just thoughtful. "Human children are different. We're born helpless. It takes us years to learn to walk and talk. It takes us nearly 2 decades to reach full maturity. During that time, we learn through play and exploration and making mistakes." "How inefficient," Dreith commented. He had been listening to the conversation. "The Vorn Collective reaches maturity within 4 months of emergence. Any species that dedicates 20 years to raising a single generation is wasting resources." Taman nodded slowly. "I can see how it would look that way to you." Commander Veskith, who had been conferring with other Krethix warriors, approached again. He loomed over Taman, his armored body radiating menace. "I have consulted with my superiors," Veskith announced. "They are willing to show mercy given the juvenile's age. However, you must remove the Helms immediately, return them, and submit your offspring for corrective behavioral conditioning. They must learn that such actions have severe consequences." "No," Taman said simply. "No?" Veskith's voice dropped to a dangerous level. "My children will not be conditioned, punished, or traumatized for playing. When they're done playing, I'll explain to them why what they did was wrong. They'll understand, they'll apologize, and they'll be more careful in the future. But they need to finish playing first." "Why?" Yelene demanded. "Explain this logic." Taman was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was patient, like a teacher explaining a difficult concept. "Because if I interrupt them now, they'll learn the wrong lesson. They'll learn that playing is bad, that curiosity is punished, that taking something interesting leads to adults yelling and taking it away. They'll learn through fear and shame." He gestured toward his children again. Nari had taken off her helm and was examining it closely, running her small fingers over the carved crystals. Yunwu was pretending his helm could shoot lasers. "But if I let them finish their game, they'll have satisfied their curiosity. The Helms will stop being magical and start being just heavy pieces of crystal. When I explain that these belong to someone else and are very special, they'll understand. They'll feel sorry. And they'll learn the right lesson, that it's important to ask before taking things that belong to others." "This is nonsense," Dreith said flatly. "You're simply too weak to discipline your offspring." "Maybe," Taman agreed. "Or maybe our species just understands something about learning that yours doesn't." More time passed. An hour, then 2. Station security tried to convince Taman to reconsider. Various delegates attempted to reason with him. Some were angry, some were confused. A few seemed curious about what would happen. Through it all, Taman sat quietly on the floor. Occasionally, he would smile at something his children did. Once, when Nari brought him her helm to show him a particularly interesting crystal pattern, he examined it with genuine interest and told her how beautiful it was. The aliens watched this interaction with incomprehension. The human was treating the situation like a normal afternoon, not a diplomatic crisis. Yunji returned after the 2nd hour. She looked tired and worried. "Taman, please. The Council is talking about extending Earth's probationary period indefinitely. Some species are saying we should be expelled from consideration entirely. This is getting serious." "It was always serious," Taman said, "but not in the way they think." "What do you mean?" "This isn't about the Helms, Yunji. It's about whether the galaxy can accept a species that does things differently. If we give in now and force our children to conform to their expectations, we'll spend the next century trying to be something we're not. And if we don't give in, then maybe we prove that there's more than one way to be civilized." By the third hour, something strange began to happen. A few of the younger security officers had started watching the children with what looked like fascination rather than anger. One of them, a reptilian species with green scales, asked Taman a question. "What are they imagining? In their game?" Taman listened to his children for a moment. "Right now, I think Nari is pretending to be an explorer discovering a new planet. Hyunwoo is the alien she meets there. They're negotiating a peace treaty. But there is no planet. There are no aliens other than us. Why imagine something that isn't real? Because imagining helps them understand what is real. When Nari pretends to be an explorer, she's learning about bravery and curiosity. When Hyunwoo pretends to be an alien, he's learning about seeing things from another perspective. Play is practice for life." The security officer tilted his head considering this. High Arbiter Yaleen had been watching from a distance. Now she approached again, but her expression had changed slightly. Less anger, more confusion. "Ambassador Taman, I have lived for 470 years. I have seen many species, many cultures, but I have never seen anything like this. You are either the most foolish being I've ever encountered, or you understand something the rest of the galaxy has missed. I cannot determine which." "Maybe both," Taman said with a slight smile. Then, finally, it happened. Hyunwoo stood up and took off his helm. He carried it to Nari. "I'm tired of this game. These things are really heavy. Want to get snacks?" Nari nodded and took off her helm too. "Yeah, I'm hungry. Appa, can we get food?" Taman stood up slowly. He took both helms from his children, holding the sacred relics carefully. They were heavier than they looked, beautiful and ancient. He walked to Commander Veskith and bowed respectfully, offering the helms. "My children are finished playing. Please accept our apologies for any offense. They meant no disrespect to your traditions." Veskith took the helms, checking them carefully for damage. There was none. The crystals gleamed as beautifully as ever. His compound eyes studied Taman for a long moment. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human." "Probably both," Taman said, echoing his earlier words to Yaleen. The news of the incident spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications. Within days, every spacefaring species had heard about the human children who stole sacred relics and the ambassador who let them keep playing. The reactions were mostly negative. The Krethix Empire issued a formal statement of disappointment in humanity's lack of discipline. The Vorn Collective published an analysis proving humans wasted too many resources on their young. Dozens of other species echoed similar concerns. Earth's hopes for full membership in the Galactic Council seemed crushed, but one being saw something different in what happened. Observer Pyrrhus was a Luminari, an ancient species that had been watching the galaxy for millions of years. The Luminari didn't take sides in politics. They simply observed, studied, and recorded. They were the galaxy's historians and anthropologists, neutral witnesses to the rise and fall of civilizations. Pyrrhus had watched the entire incident through the observation deck's security feeds. He had seen Taman's calm patience. He had watched the children play. And something about it had caught his attention in a way nothing had for decades. The Luminari were beings of pure energy, usually contained in crystalline forms for interaction with physical beings. Pyrrhus appeared as a floating geometric shape that glowed with soft white light. He didn't have a face, but somehow still managed to convey curiosity. He requested a meeting with Ambassador Taman. They met in a quiet garden area of the station, one of the few places with growing plants and flowing water. Nari and Hyunwoo were there too, playing near a fountain while their father talked with the strange, glowing visitor. "Ambassador Taman," Pyrrhus said, his voice like wind chimes. "I have a request. I wish to study your species' approach to juvenile development. With your permission, I would like to observe your family for several months." Taman was surprised. Why? Because in 4 million years of observing civilizations, I have never seen anything quite like what happened 3 days ago. Most species either protect their young completely or throw them into maturity immediately. You do something different. You let them explore, make mistakes, even take things they shouldn't. Yet you trust they will learn and grow. This is unusual. I want to understand it. Taman looked over at his children, who were now trying to catch water droplets from the fountain. You're welcome to observe us, Observer Pyrrhus, though I warn you, life with 6-year-olds is often chaotic. I have studied the formation of stars, Pyrrhus said. I believe I can handle chaos. He was wrong. Over the following weeks, Pyrrhus observed the human family constantly. He watched morning routines, meal times, play sessions, and bedtimes. He attended the children's school classes on the station. He saw fights between siblings and watched how they were resolved. He witnessed tantrums and triumphs. What he saw confused him at first. Human children were astonishingly helpless compared to other species. Nari and Hyunwoo couldn't hunt for their own food. They couldn't defend themselves. They needed help with basic tasks. They asked endless questions. They made constant mistakes. But Taman and his wife Minho didn't seem concerned by this weakness. They answered the questions patiently. They helped with the tasks. They let the children make mistakes and then talked about what went wrong. One day, Pyrrhus watched as Hyunwoo tried to build a model spaceship from a kit. The boy struggled for over an hour, growing increasingly frustrated. He put pieces in wrong places, had to take them apart, and start over multiple times. Taman sat nearby, reading a book. He didn't help unless Hyunwoo asked a question. He didn't take over the project. He just stayed close. Finally, after many attempts, Hyunwoo finished the model. It wasn't perfect. One wing was slightly crooked, but it was complete. The boy's face lit up with pure joy. I did it, Appa. Look. You certainly did, Taman said warmly. And you figured it out all by yourself. How do you feel? Proud, Hyunwoo said, grinning. It was really hard, but I didn't give up. Pyrrhus floated closer to Taman after the children went to bed. I don't understand. You could have built that model in minutes. Why let him struggle for an hour? Because I already know how to build models, Taman said. Hyunwoo needed to learn, not just how to build the ship, but that he could figure things out on his own. That struggle leads to achievement. That persistence pays off. If I'd done it for him, he wouldn't have learned any of that. But it was inefficient. An hour wasted on a simple task. Was it wasted? He learned problem-solving, he learned patience, he learned to handle frustration, and he learned that he's capable of more than he thought. That's not waste. That's education. Pyrrhus recorded this interaction in his data files marked with a note. Humans deliberately allow inefficiency for long-term learning gains. Purpose unclear. Another day, Pyrrhus observed the children at their school. The class had 20 students from various species. The teacher, a being named Instructor Velth, was explaining basic mathematics. Most of the alien children absorbed the information quickly. They could process and memorize data efficiently. They answered questions correctly and moved on. Nari raised her hand with a different kind of question. But why does it work that way? She asked. Velth seemed puzzled. Because that is the mathematical principle. But why? What makes it true? It simply is. It has always been so. Nari frowned, unsatisfied. Later, she asked her father the same question. Taman didn't just give her the answer. He showed her with physical objects, building understanding from the ground up. It took much longer than just memorizing the rule, but Nari's face showed she truly understood the concept now. Pyrrhus noted this too. Human juveniles don't just accept information, they question. They need to understand why, not just what. Inefficient, but thorough. The most striking observation came during a conflict between the twins. Hyunwoo had taken Nari's drawing tablet without asking. Nari got angry and hit him. Hyunwoo hit back. Both children ended up crying and yelling. Minho, their mother, separated them calmly. She was a scientist, precise and thoughtful in her approach. She didn't yell. She didn't immediately punish them. Instead, she sat both children down and asked questions. Hyunwoo, why did you take your sister's tablet? I wanted to draw and mine was charging. Did you ask her first? Hyunwoo looked down. No. Why not? I thought she'd say no. Minho turned to Nari. Why did you hit your brother? He took my stuff. It made me mad. I understand you were angry. Is hitting a good way to solve problems? Nari thought about it. No, she admitted quietly. What could you have done instead? Used words. Yes. What words? I could have said, that's mine. Please give it back. Minho nodded. That would have been better. Hyunwoo, what should you have done? Asked first, he mumbled. Right. Now, you both hurt each other. What should happen now? The children looked at each other. Sorry, they said at the same time. Then, without prompting, they hugged. The whole interaction took 15 minutes. No punishment, no yelling, just questions and thinking and understanding. Pyrrhus was fascinated. Most species would simply punish the aggression. You spent 15 minutes talking through the conflict. Why? Because punishment teaches them to avoid getting caught, Minho explained. We want them to understand why hitting is wrong and develop better ways to handle conflict. That takes time and discussion, not just consequences. But this requires so much energy from the parents, so much time and attention. Yes, Minho agreed. Raising humans is very resource-intensive. But we're not just keeping them alive. We're shaping how they think, how they solve problems, how they treat others. That's worth the investment. Pyrrhus spent 3 months observing the family. He documented everything. And slowly, a pattern emerged that surprised him. Yes, human children were weak and dependent for an incredibly long time. Yes, they required massive amounts of parental investment. Yes, they were inefficient learners compared to species that could download information directly into their brains. But they had something else. He noticed it first in how the children played. Nari and Hyunwoo would spend hours creating elaborate imaginary scenarios. One day they were space explorers. The next day they were underwater scientists. The next they were running a restaurant for aliens. None of it was real, but they treated it seriously. They made up rules. They solved imaginary problems. They negotiated roles and responsibilities. One day, the children invited several alien students to play with them. Most of the aliens didn't understand pretend play. They would say things like, "But there is no spaceship," or "We are not actually underwater." But slowly, some of them began to join in. A young Quelix started pretending to be a sea creature. A small Dranian played the role of the spaceship's computer. They were learning something they'd never been taught, how to imagine. Pyrrhus watched this and suddenly understood something important. He began testing the children with small puzzles and problems, logic games that had standard solutions. The alien children typically found the expected answer quickly. But Nari and Hyunwoo often found different answers. Sometimes they found solutions that weren't in the puzzle designer's original plan. They approached problems sideways, with creativity and intuition, rather than pure logic. Once, Pyrrhus gave them a maze puzzle. The goal was to find the shortest path through it. Hyunwoo studied it for a moment, then drew a line straight through the walls. You can't go through walls, Pyrrhus pointed out. Why not? In space, you can move in all directions. Maybe these aren't walls. Maybe they're just suggestions. It was wrong according to the rules, but it showed a kind of thinking that Pyrrhus rarely saw, the ability to question the rules themselves. After 3 months, Pyrrhus compiled his research into a preliminary report. He titled it, "The Strategic Advantage of Extended Development." His thesis was simple but revolutionary. Humanity's long, resource-intensive childhood wasn't a weakness. It was a feature that produced something the galaxy had very little of: cognitive flexibility. Most species were born knowing what they needed to know. They were efficient, but rigid. Humans had to learn everything, which meant they learned how to learn. They developed the ability to adapt, to think creatively, to imagine solutions that didn't exist yet. Pyrrhus presented his preliminary findings to the Galactic Council. The chamber was full of delegates from hundreds of worlds. Observer Pyrrhus floated at the center, his crystalline form projecting data and images. "I have observed the human family for 92 standard cycles," he announced. "My findings contradict common assumptions about their species." He showed footage of the children playing, learning, making mistakes. He presented data on their problem-solving approaches compared to other species. "Human juveniles are weak and dependent far longer than any other spacefaring species," Pyrrhus continued. "This appears to be a disadvantage. However, this extended development period allows for something unique: the cultivation of adaptive thinking." High Arbiter Yelene spoke up. "Observer Pyrrhus, with respect, this seems like a generous interpretation of inefficiency. Yes, humans can think creatively. But what practical advantage does this provide? We have computers for problem solving. We have established protocols for most situations. Creativity is interesting but ultimately unnecessary." "Is it?" Pyrrhus asked. "How many times has this council faced a problem that couldn't be solved with existing protocols?" The chamber fell quiet. Everyone knew the answer: many times. The emergency alert sounded across Vos Prime 3 weeks after Observer Pyrrhus presented his findings. Every delegate received the same urgent message on their communicators: a crisis on the frontier, all available resources needed. Taman was having lunch with his family when the alert came through. He read it quickly, his expression growing serious. "What's wrong?" Minho asked. "A colony ship is in trouble. The Vorn Collective's ship carrying 50,000 colonists. Systems failure near an unstable wormhole. Can they rescue them?" Taman read more of the report. "They're trying, but it doesn't look good." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within the hour. Taman attended as part of Earth's delegation. The chamber was tense with urgency. Counselor Draith stood at the center, his small gray form trembling with emotion. "The colony ship Bright Future is caught in the gravitational pull of an unstable wormhole. Our people have 48 hours before the ship is pulled through and destroyed. We need help." High Arbiter Yelene spoke calmly. "We have dispatched our finest engineers and strategists. They are analyzing the situation now. We will find a solution." But as hours passed, no solution came. The problem was unprecedented. The colony ship's main AI had completely failed due to a cascade of system errors. Backup systems were offline. The ship was essentially a dead hulk being slowly pulled toward destruction. Normal rescue approaches wouldn't work because the wormhole's gravitational forces interfered with tractor beams and docking procedures. The galaxy's best minds worked on the problem. Engineers from a dozen species ran simulations. Military strategists proposed elaborate plans. Scientists analyzed the wormhole's behavior. Nothing worked. Every solution had a fatal flaw. Either the rescue ships would be caught in the gravitational pull too, or the approaches would take too long, or the physics simply didn't support the plan. After 24 hours, panic began to set in. Counselor Draith was openly distraught. 50,000 of his people were going to die, and no one could save them. Taman watched the proceedings with a thoughtful expression. He'd been reading the technical reports, studying the simulations. The problem was indeed complex, but something about it reminded him of the puzzles he'd watched his children solve. During a break in the session, he approached Observer Pyrrhus, who was present as a neutral observer. "Pyrrhus, you've been studying human children and how they think differently. I have an unusual idea." I am listening. What if we let the children look at this problem? Paris's crystalline form pulsed with surprise. You want juveniles to solve a crisis that has stumped our finest engineers? Not solve it necessarily, but maybe look at it differently. You said yourself that human children approach problems in unconventional ways. They question assumptions. They think creatively. What if they see something the adults have missed? This is highly irregular. Everything about this situation is irregular. Taemin's voice was urgent but calm. We have 24 hours left and no solutions. What's the harm in trying? Paris considered this. It was an absurd suggestion. Letting children work on a problem this important went against every protocol, but he had spent 3 months watching those children solve problems in ways that surprised him. I will support your request to the council, Paris said finally. The council's reaction was exactly what Taemin expected. Absolutely not. High Arbiter Yelene's voice rang through the chamber. This is not a game. 50,000 lives hang in the balance. Councillor Draith was even more offended. You would trust my people's lives to children? Human children? This is an insult. Commander Veskith, who had been mostly quiet during the crisis, spoke up. The human spawn took our sacred helms because they did not understand their importance. Now you want them to handle something far more critical? This is madness. Taemin stood in the center of the chamber, calm despite the anger directed at him. I understand your concerns, but consider this. Every expert in the galaxy has looked at this problem using conventional thinking. It hasn't worked. My children don't know enough to think conventionally. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Ignorance is not an advantage, Yelene snapped. Isn't it? Observer Pyrus floated forward. I have studied problem-solving across thousands of species. Often, the most difficult problems are solved not by experts, but by those who don't know what's impossible. Human children excel at this. We have less than a day, Yunji added, standing beside Taemin. If we try the ambassador's suggestion and it fails, we've lost what? A few hours? We can continue conventional approaches at the same time. The council argued for another 30 minutes. Time ticked away. Finally, with visible reluctance, they agreed, mostly because they had no other options. You have 6 hours, Yelene said coldly. If your children cannot contribute anything useful in that time, we will proceed with conventional rescue attempts. Taemin bowed and left the chamber immediately. He found his children in their quarters, playing with building blocks. Minho was working on her tablet nearby. Nari, Hyunwoo, I need your help with something important, Taemin said, kneeling to their level. Both children looked up with interest. What is it, Appa? There's a big ship full of people in trouble. They're stuck near something called a wormhole, and we need to help them get away before they get pulled in. The smartest people in the galaxy are trying to solve it, but they haven't figured it out yet. I thought maybe you two could look at the problem with fresh eyes. Like a puzzle? Hyunwoo asked. Exactly like a puzzle. Okay, Nari said enthusiastically. We're good at puzzles. Taemin set up a simplified simulation on a large display in their quarters. He'd worked with engineers to create a version that children could understand. It showed the ship as a simple shape, the wormhole as a swirling circle, and various other elements. 5 other human children joined them, all around the same age. Their parents were scientists and diplomats on the station, and all had volunteered their children for this unusual experiment. At first, the children just played with the simulation, moving things around randomly. Engineers watching from the council chambers shook their heads. This was a waste of time. But Taemin sat back and let them explore. Minho brought snacks and drinks. They treated it like an afternoon playtime, not a crisis situation. After an hour, one of the children, a girl named Sora, said something interesting. Why are they trying to pull the ship away from the swirly thing? What if they pushed it toward the swirly thing instead? An engineer monitoring the session immediately spoke up on the communication link. That's counterintuitive. Moving toward the wormhole increases the danger. But Pyrrhus, who was also watching, said, "Let them explain their thinking." Taman asked Sora gently, "What do you mean, push toward it?" "Like when you're on the swings," Sora explained. "If you want to go higher, you don't pull back. You lean forward at the right time. Maybe the ship could use the swirly thing's pull to help it, not fight against it." A human physicist named Minjay, who was listening, suddenly sat up straight. "Wait! She's describing a gravitational slingshot maneuver, but we dismissed that because the vectors don't align with—" He stopped, recalculating. "Unless we're thinking about it wrong." The children continued playing with the simulation. Yunwoo suggested breaking parts off the ship. "Like when my toy's battery is dead, it's lighter if I take out the heavy parts." "Sacrificing cargo sections as counterweight," an engineer murmured. "That could work if we time it right." Nari pointed out that the ship could move in small bits instead of one big movement. When Appa parallel parks, he doesn't do it all at once. He goes forward a little, back a little, forward again. "Multiple small course corrections instead of one major burn," Minjay said, typing rapidly. "That would require less power and reduce the risk of structural failure from sudden acceleration." For the next 3 hours, the children played with the simulation. They weren't thinking about physics or engineering. They were just trying different things to see what worked. They made mistakes. They laughed when things went wrong. They treated it like a game. But with each suggestion, the human engineers watching began to see possibilities. Ideas that had been dismissed because they seemed too simple or didn't fit conventional approaches. Approaches that violated standard rescue protocols but might actually work. Minjay and a team of engineers started combining the children's simple ideas with complex technical knowledge. They ran simulations with real physics. Slowly, incredibly, a solution began to form. It was unconventional. It used the wormhole's gravity instead of fighting it. It involved sacrificing parts of the ship to create momentum. It required dozens of tiny course corrections instead of one decisive move. It was nothing like a standard rescue operation. But according to the simulations, it would work. Minjay brought the completed plan to the council with only 6 hours left before the ship would be pulled through the wormhole. "This is the plan," he announced, projecting the simulation. "It's based on suggestions from the children, refined with technical specifications. It has a 73% chance of success." The council chamber was silent as they watched the simulation play out. The plan looked chaotic and dangerous. But the numbers supported it. "This came from children?" Commander Veskith asked, disbelief in his voice. "The core concepts, yes," Minjay confirmed. "They saw the problem as a game puzzle, not an engineering crisis. That freed them from conventional thinking. High Arbiter Yelene studied the plan carefully. It's unorthodox, risky, but our alternatives have a success rate near 0. She looked at Counselor Draith. "These are your people at risk. The decision is yours." Draith was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Taman, then at the simulation, then back at Taman. Finally, he spoke. "Implement the plan. If the human children can save my people when our greatest minds cannot—" He didn't finish the sentence. The next 5 hours were tense. The rescue operation proceeded exactly as planned, which meant it looked terrifying to watch. The rescue ships approached the colony vessel using the wormhole's pull to assist them rather than resist. The colony ship jettisoned its empty cargo sections in precise sequence, each one altering its trajectory slightly. Dozens of tiny thruster burns guided it through a complex path that looked random but was precisely calculated. On Voss Prime, everyone watched. The children didn't fully understand what was happening. They'd gone back to playing after their session ended. But the adults knew. 50,000 lives depended on ideas that came from 6-year-olds playing a game. With 30 minutes to spare before the ship would have been pulled through the wormhole, It broke free of the gravitational field. The rescue ships attached and began towing it to safety. Every person on board survived. The council chamber erupted in celebration. Counselor Draith openly wept with relief. Even High Arbiter Yelene showed emotion, her stern expression softening. Taman received the news in his quarters. His children were having dinner, chatting about their day. They'd already forgotten about the puzzle game from earlier. To them, it was just another afternoon activity. Minho looked at her husband with wonder. Do they know what they did? Not really, Taman said softly. To them, it was just play. And that's exactly why it worked. The rescue changed everything. Within days, the story spread across the galaxy. Not just the bare facts, but the full truth. Human children, the same ones who had stolen sacred relics, had provided the key insights that saved 50,000 lives. What every expert in the galaxy had missed, 6-year-olds had seen simply by playing. Observer Pyrrhus published his complete study 2 weeks later. He titled it, The Strategic Advantage of Extended Development, How Humanity's Children Win Wars Before They Begin. His conclusion was clear and backed by 3 months of data. Humanity's long, resource-intensive childhood wasn't a weakness. It was an evolutionary strategy that produced something rare in the galaxy, minds capable of genuine creative problem-solving. The report spread through academic and political channels. Scientists studied it. Military strategists analyzed it. Even species that had dismissed humanity began to reconsider. One morning, a message arrived for Ambassador Taman. It was from Commander Veskith, requesting a private meeting. They met in one of the station's meditation gardens. Veskith stood tall in his chitinous armor, looking every bit the warrior he was. But when he spoke, his voice was different than before. Softer, thoughtful. Ambassador Taman, the Krethix commander began, I owe you an apology. When your offspring took our sacred Helms, I saw only disrespect and chaos. I demanded punishment. I called for justice according to our laws. He paused, his mandibles clicking quietly. I did not see what you saw. My people are born ready for battle. We emerge from our eggs able to fight, to follow orders, to serve the Empire. We have always believed this made us strong. Perhaps it also makes us limited. Taman nodded slowly. Your people are strong, Commander. But strength comes in many forms. Indeed. Veskith reached into a compartment in his armor and pulled out 2 small objects. They were miniature versions of the Honor Guard Helms, perfectly crafted but sized for human children. The crystals gleamed with the same beauty as the originals. These are for your offspring. In our culture, the Honor Helms are earned through great deeds and devotion to duty. Your children have saved 50,000 lives. By any measure, they have earned the right to wear them. He held out the small helms. They are honorary blade bearers of the Krethix Empire. Let them play with these as much as they wish. Taman accepted the helms with a respectful bow. Thank you, Commander. This means more than you know. There is one condition, Veskith added. Someday, when they are older, I would like them to visit our homeworld, to teach our warriors what they taught the galaxy, how to see problems differently. We train our people to be strong. Perhaps you could teach them to be wise as well. That same week, Counselor Draith also requested a meeting. The small gray alien stood in Taman's office, looking uncomfortable but determined. I must apologize, Draith said without preamble. I insulted your offspring. I called them undisciplined. I suggested humans were unfit for galactic society because you could not control your young. He looked down. Your children saved my people. They did what I, with all my years and knowledge, could not do. I was wrong. You weren't wrong to be concerned, Taman said gently. My children did take something that didn't belong to them. They didn't understand the significance. From your perspective, it looked like chaos. But you understood what we did not. that the chaos of childhood serves a purpose. That play is not waste but preparation. Draith looked up at Taman. The Vorn Collective has always valued efficiency. We mature quickly. We reach full productivity within months. But watching your children work on that rescue plan, I realized something. We may be efficient, but we are also predictable. We think the same thoughts, reach the same conclusions. There is safety in that, but also limitation. He held out a data pad. I have recommended to my government that we establish an exchange program with Earth. We want to learn about your approach to education and development. Perhaps we cannot change how quickly we mature, but we can change how we think about learning. The Galactic Council called for a special session 1 month after the rescue. The chamber was full. Every species wanted to be present for what was coming. High Arbiter Yaleen stood at the center. For once, the ancient being did not look stern. She looked thoughtful, almost uncertain. We gather today to vote on Earth's status in the Galactic Council, she announced. Humanity has been on probationary status for 15 years. They have been evaluated, observed, and judged by many standards. Today, we decide if they are ready for full membership. She paused, looking around the chamber. Before the vote, I wish to speak. I have lived for 470 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed wars and peace, brilliance and folly. In all that time, I believed I understood what made a civilization worthy of respect. I was wrong. A murmur ran through the chamber. High Arbiter Yaleen never admitted being wrong. When the human children took the Krethix Helms, I saw chaos and disrespect. I believed it confirmed everything we feared about humanity, that they were too emotional, too undisciplined, too unpredictable for galactic society. She looked directly at Taman. I did not understand that what we saw as weakness was actually strength in development. The Quarian people are born ancient. We emerge from gestation with centuries of genetic memory. We are wise from our first breath. This has always been our pride. She paused again. But perhaps it is also our limitation. We know much, but we learn little. We are wise, but not creative. We see problems through the lens of millions of years of experience, which means we see them the same way our ancestors did. Humanity raises their young differently. They protect them, yes, but also let them explore. Let them play. Let them make mistakes and learn from them. This seemed inefficient to us, wasteful. But it produces something we have forgotten how to create. Minds that can think in truly new ways. She held up a data crystal. I have reviewed Observer Pyrus's complete study. I have examined the rescue operation. I have spoken with my own people's finest minds. And I must conclude that humanity may have something to teach the rest of us. Not despite their long childhood, but because of it. The chamber was absolutely silent now. Therefore, Yaleen continued, I vote to grant Earth full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. And I formally request that humanity establish educational exchanges with interested species. We wish to learn from you, as much as you have learned from us. The vote was called. Out of 247 species present, 244 voted in favor of Earth's full membership. Only 3 abstained. None voted against. Taman stood and bowed deeply to the assembly. Yunji, standing beside him, had tears in her eyes. On behalf of humanity, we accept this honor and this responsibility. We will do our best to be worthy members of this council. That evening, Taman returned to his quarters to find a small celebration waiting. His children had decorated the room with drawings and paper chains. Minho had prepared a special dinner. We heard you did something important today, Appa, Nari said. We all did something important, Taman corrected. Earth is now a full member of the Galactic Council. Do you know what that means? We can stay here, Hyunwoo asked hopefully. He'd made friends among the alien children on the station. We can stay. And more than that, the galaxy has decided that humans belong here. That our way of doing things, even the strange parts, has value. Like playing? Nari asked. Taman smiled and pulled out the miniature honor helms Commander Veskith had given him. Like playing? In fact, the Krethix Empire wants you to have these. They're special helms that warriors earn through great deeds. Commander Veskith says you've earned them. Both children's eyes went wide. Really? We can keep them? You can keep them. They're yours to play with whenever you want. Nari took her helm carefully, turning it over in her small hands. The crystals caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. Appa? Are we in trouble for taking the other helms? No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. But we took something that wasn't ours. That was wrong, wasn't it? Taman knelt down to her level. Yes, it was wrong to take things without asking. Do you understand why? Because they were important to someone else. And we should respect other people's things. That's exactly right. See? You learned. That's what matters. But everyone was so mad, Hyunwoo said quietly. We didn't mean to make people mad. I know you didn't. Sometimes when we don't understand each other, we get upset. But you know what? By being yourselves, by playing and exploring and thinking creatively, you taught the whole galaxy something important. You taught them that there are many ways to be smart and strong and valuable. Just by playing? Nari seemed doubtful. Just by playing. Never underestimate the power of seeing the world with fresh eyes. The years passed. 20 years later, much had changed. Nari stood on the bridge of her ship, the GSS Explorer, watching a new solar system appear in the view screen. She was 26 now, captain of her own vessel in the Galactic Exploratory Fleet. Her specialty was first contact situations with newly discovered species. She'd learned that her childhood experience, that natural curiosity, that willingness to try new approaches, that comfort with the unknown, made her uniquely suited for meeting aliens who thought differently than anyone else in the galaxy. Hyunwoo, meanwhile, had become a senior diplomat. He worked in the Galactic Council's Conflict Resolution Division. His approach was unusual. He listened more than he talked, asked questions before offering solutions, and helped opposing parties find common ground they didn't know existed. He still remembered what his father taught him during the Helm incident, that patience and understanding could solve problems that force and anger could not. Ambassador Taman had retired from active diplomatic service, but he remained busy. He now served as an advisor to the Galactic Council on Education and Cognitive Development. Dozens of species had established exchange programs with Earth, sending observers to study human child rearing and educational approaches. Not every species could replicate humanity's long childhood, biology was biology, but many had learned to incorporate play, creativity, and exploration into their educational systems. The galaxy was slowly becoming more flexible, more innovative, more willing to question old assumptions. Minho had become the director of the Galactic Institute for Developmental Studies. Her research on cognitive flexibility and creative problem-solving was now standard reading in universities across hundreds of worlds. Observer Pyrus, who had started it all with his curiosity about human children, had continued his studies. He'd observed dozens of human families over the years, documenting how play and exploration shaped development. His work had fundamentally changed how the galaxy thought about learning and intelligence. On Voss Prime, in the diplomatic quarter where it all began, a monument had been erected. It showed two small human children wearing oversized crystal helms, looking up at the stars with wonder in their eyes. The plaque beneath was written in 47 languages. It read, "They'll return them when they're done playing." In honor of humanity's gift to the galaxy, the wisdom to let the young explore, to let them make mistakes, and to trust that play today builds the heroes of tomorrow. Every day, children from dozens of species played in the area around the monument. Before the Helm incident, the diplomatic quarter had been quiet and serious, no place for juveniles. Now it was filled with the sounds of laughter and imagination. Pyrrhus visited the monument often. He would float there in his crystalline form, watching the children play. Sometimes visitors would approach him, asking about the statue and what it meant. "It's a reminder," he would tell them, "that what seems like weakness can be strength, that efficiency isn't everything, that taking time to grow, to play, to explore, to make mistakes, these things aren't wastes. They're investments in a kind of intelligence that can't be taught, only developed." The humans taught us something we'd forgotten over millions of years of civilization. They taught us that growing slowly isn't a flaw. It's how you build minds strong enough to imagine new worlds and hearts brave enough to explore them. One day, Taemin visited the monument with his grandchildren, Nari's daughter and Hyunwoo's son, both around 6 years old. The children ran ahead to play with other juveniles near the fountain. "Look at that, Appa," the little girl called. "That statue looks like Aunt Nari and Uncle Hyunwoo when they were little." "That's because it is them," Taemin explained. "Really? What did they do?" Taemin smiled, watching his grandchildren with the same patient joy he'd watched his children all those years ago. "They played, and in playing, they changed the galaxy. Just by playing, just by playing. Never forget that, little one. The things that seem simple, curiosity, imagination, joy, wonder, these are the things that change worlds." The children ran off to join their friends, already inventing some elaborate game involving spaceships and aliens and adventures. Taemin watched them go, content. Pyrrhus floated beside him. "You seem satisfied, old friend." "I am. Look at this place. Look at all these children from different worlds playing together, learning from each other. 20 years ago, this would have been impossible. Now it's normal. Because 2 human children took some Helms, and their father had the wisdom to let them play." "No," Taemin corrected gently. "Because the galaxy had the wisdom to watch, to listen, and to learn. We just gave them a reason to pay attention." High above them, ships from 1,000 worlds came and went from Voss Prime. Inside those ships were families, diplomats, traders, explorers, all part of a galaxy that was slowly learning to think differently. And in the diplomatic quarter, children played beneath a monument to 2 cubs who stole guard helms and accidentally taught the galaxy about the power of patience, the importance of play, and the revolutionary act of letting children be children. Somewhere in that crowd of playing juveniles, a small Krethix child picked up a toy helm and put it on. She turned to a human child and said, "I'm a blade bearer. Want to go on an adventure?" The human child grinned. "Yes, let's explore a new planet." And together, they ran off into their imaginations, building futures neither of them could yet see, but both were already creating. The galaxy watched and learned.